Hi folks, welcome to the second video from the computer course. As you may notice from my background, this is not being recorded at the church building. We did have a very successful second course session at the church building, but the video for it would have been quite stop-starty, so I'm recording it again from my shed. So hopefully that will still be useful. There won't be any questions because I'm all alone here, but hopefully I can cover the same kind of things. So the things we're going to cover today are connecting to Wi-Fi, which can be useful for if you're in a coffee shop or a hotel or something, and how to start an application in Windows, how to copy and paste, and some useful keyboard shortcuts. I think that's about all we covered when I actually did this on Tuesday. So let's start off with some Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is connecting wirelessly to the internet. So if you want to check email or read web pages and things, or watch videos, and you don't have another internet connection because maybe you're away from home, or maybe you've got a laptop and you're connecting to what's called your router. I'm not going to go into all the details of network configuration, etc., but at home, you've probably got something called a router, and it will be connected to your computer either wirelessly with Wi-Fi or with an Ethernet cable, which we looked at last time. But usually, if you are connected with Wi-Fi, then that will already be set up for you and you won't need to do it all the time. Whereas if you're going to a hotel or a station, something like that, often you need to connect to a specific Wi-Fi, what's called hotspot. So for this purpose, I've got a little Wi-Fi dongle. These are really useful. Let me know if you want details of these. Basically, this has a mobile phone SIM in it that's just for internet connection. And I've got mine configured to be called Skeet Mobile, and the password at the moment is TMC-course. Now, obviously, I'm putting this video up on the internet. I will be changing the password back to my normal password for this because you don't normally want to tell everyone the password for personal devices like this, or your phone may well have a Wi-Fi hotspot functionality as well. But that will be the password for the course. So one of the reasons for covering this in this session is so that if you're coming in person to the other computer courses, the course sessions, you'll be able to connect to my hotspot and get internet access that way so that we can practice browsing and practice getting at email and things. So I'm going to look at the taskbar, which is the bottom bit here. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving around the taskbar. On the left hand side, I've got some application icons and the start button. We'll be coming back to all that later on. On the right hand side, the bottom right, are sort of status icons. So they tell me what the time is and that my battery isn't quite full but is charging and that sound is turned on. And this little world with a no entry sign next to it shows no internet access, but it says connections are available. And just to reinforce what I think I've said before, your start menu, your start bar, your taskbar, sorry, at the bottom may well be slightly different. You may have a little search bar that you could type into and get search results. It may be that your applications are in the middle instead of on the left-hand side. It depends on how you've got it configured and frankly how long you've had Windows set up like that. So we're going to focus on this world with strike through no entry sign, and this shows us all kinds of things about the network at the moment. So it says available, which means I can see that there are some Wi-Fi connections around, but you're not connected to anything at the moment. This little symbol here is Bluetooth, so I'm not connected to anything on Bluetooth at the moment. I'm not in flight mode. Flight mode turns off all the Wi-Fi, so if you're on a plane and want to use a laptop or a tablet, you need to go into flight mode to turn off the Wi-Fi, and there are some other aspects here around battery life and sound and things. So I'm going to click on Manage Wi-Fi Connections, the little arrow here. Usually if you see an arrow like that, it means if you click there, there will be something else to do. So here we can see various connections about my shed, but Skeet Mobile is the one we're going to connect to today. And you can tick whether or not you want to connect automatically, which means anytime that Wi-Fi hotspot is within range, if you're not connected to a network already, it would connect to that. So I'm going to untick that for the moment and click connect. And this is where it says, what's your network security key, which most people would call a password. Now, I've said it's TMC-course. Now, often, particularly if you're typing in a password from a hotel or something, and it's something you haven't typed before, if it's something very simple, you may be quite confident in what you've typed. But if you're not, there's a little, this is meant to be an eye with an eyelid above it. And if you click on that and click and hold, it shows you what you've typed so far. And then when you release, it goes back to not showing anything. And typically, obviously, you don't want to show the password to someone who's right near you for whatever reason and can see your screen. But if you want to see what you've typed, just click on that eye. So then we do next, and it's verifying and connecting. And it now says it's connected and secured. And now at the bottom here, we can see Skeet Mobile internet access and a dot with 4 bars of signal. So it's got a very strong signal to my Wi-Fi dongle, which is great. So we now have an internet connection. Okay, moving on from that. Nothing else today is going to be particularly about network things, but next time we're going to be talking in particular about web browsing. And so obviously we'll need an internet connection for that. Today, for the rest of the time, we'll be talking about starting an application and then using it a bit. And the application I'm going to use for this session is Notepad. So everyone will have Notepad on their Windows PC. It's just a simple way of editing text files. So it doesn't have any fancy bold and italics and fonts and page layouts and tables and things. It's just what we call plain text files. But it's still a really useful application that everyone's got. So everyone should be able to try to follow along with this. Now, as it happens, I've got a shortcut to Notepad on my desktop, and I've got a shortcut on my taskbar as well. And I've deliberately put them there. Normally I wouldn't have them. You probably don't have them on your Windows PC at the moment, but I've put them there so that I can show you different ways of starting an application. If you're not using Notepad, you might have your favorite game or web browser or email or whatever, and you may have desktop shortcuts, you may have taskbar shortcuts. I'm just using Notepad as something that everyone will have and could get to. So if you've already got an icon on your taskbar, you can see I've got 8 different icons here, and your computer may well not have any of these because these are applications that I happen to use quite a lot. You may well have Chrome or Edge, a web browser of some form, but all of the rest of these you probably wouldn't have, and that's absolutely fine. It's just whatever you tend to use is what you want to have on the taskbar. And I'll explain in a minute how to put something on the taskbar if it isn't already. So the simplest way of launching an application is just to click on it on the taskbar. So I click on that and we've now got Notepad up, and that's all great. That's way 1. And I just had to single click on that. It's dead easy. If you've got a desktop icon, and personally, I like to keep my desktop as clear as possible, that you will see plenty of people with hundreds and hundreds of icons. They've got they've got documents, they've got applications, they've got folders, all kinds of things. Normally, I would just have the recycle bin. That's normally all I have on my desktop, but it's entirely up to you. But if you do have an application there, you can just double click on it, and again, it will start Notepad for you, or whatever application it is. So that's the second way of starting something. The third and fourth way all involve the Start menu, which is this. This is the Windows icon, these 4 squares that are meant to look like a window, I guess, with some leading down the middle. There's an old Windows icon that you may still see on some older keyboards. Often have the Windows icon on them, and in fact, I don't know how visible this will be on the video, but the keyboard that I'm using at the moment has a Windows icon there, which has a sort of swooshy set of windows, whereas the newer icons are more square. But either way, it's still the Windows icon, and this is the Start menu. So we can go to Notepad by clicking on the Start menu, and then it will show you some pinned applications, and if the one that you want is there, that's fine. But you can then, if it's not, go to All Apps, and that will give you a list with a little scroll bar over here, and we can scroll all the way down to N for Notepad and click there. Great, and it starts it. Or, and this is what I like to do, if I've not got something on my taskbar and I've kept my desktop nice and tidy, if you click on the Start menu and then just start typing for what you're interested in. So in this case, I'm going to type NOT, and we can see that Notepad is there, and there are a few other things, nota bene, that's what I use to send out the TMC notices, sticky notes and OneNote. You may have some of those or none of them, but Notepad is the one I'm interested in. And so you can then either click there, or what I usually do is, if I'm just using the keyboard, I don't even click on the Start menu. I use the Windows key to open up the Start menu, and then I just start typing, and if it's right there, I just press Enter, and it starts it. No need to move the mouse at all, which gets me onto keyboard shortcuts, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. So just to remind you, 4 different ways of starting an application. We've got single clicking on the taskbar, double clicking on a desktop icon, using the Start menu and All Apps, and then scrolling down until you find the right thing, and then you can click, or starting the Start menu and typing so that you can search for what you want to open. So suppose we've got Notepad open now. The next thing I'm going to show you, which is, even though I'm using Notepad here, it's the same for all well-behaved Windows applications, and that's copy and pasting. So the idea is there is something, whether that's a file or some text, an email address, a picture, any number of things you can copy from one place to another, and that's very often useful if, suppose someone has forwarded you an email from someone else and you didn't have that person's email address before. Well, you can select it in the email, copy it, and then create a new email and paste it in there. So copying is a matter of selecting something. So in this case, I'm going to, with the mouse, click where I want to start, and then drag to just select a bit of text. So here I've got "Oh Whirl" selected. And then if I right click and say copy, there are lots of other options here, but we're only interested in copy. And then I can type some other things, and then right click again to bring up this context menu, and now I can paste. So that's going to bring in what I'd previously copied, and this is known as copying to the clipboard. It's some arbitrary idea of a clipboard that you can put things on and then take them off again and paste. So if I paste, we'll get the "Oh Whirl" there again. So just as a reminder, let's copy the whole of "world" this time. So if I select all of that, and I've just done that by clicking and dragging the mouse, right click, copy, and then right click again and paste. And there's "world" again. So that's doing everything with the mouse, but I don't like using the mouse much because I've got my hands on the keyboard already. If I have to move my hand away to use the mouse, it takes me longer. So I'm going to, let me just get rid of some of this and show you how I would copy and paste "hello." So firstly, I'd use the cursor keys, which are the keys with arrows on. They're in different places on different keyboards. They're typically somewhere near the bottom right of the keyboard, but I'm going to use that to move the cursor around. I could just click in the right place as well if I have my hands on the mouse, but then I'm going to hold down Shift and then use the right arrow to change the selection. So that's equivalent to clicking and dragging to select some text. And now, instead of using the right click and then select copy from the context menu, I'm going to press Control C. So that's I hold down Control and press C to copy. And then let's some text here, whatever, just to show this is all, we've copied the word hello to the clipboard, and now we want to paste it. So right next to C is the letter V. So if I press Control and then V, so that's holding down Control and then press and release V, it's pasted. So as a reminder, copy is Control C and paste is Control V. And that should work for almost anything. So for example, if I had in demo folder, here's some random document, I can again press Control C and then Control V, and it's created a copy, this time of a file, not just of a word, but of a file. And I could do it for a folder as well. So again, if you prefer using the mouse, that's absolutely fine. And again, you can do, well, it's not as obvious here, but I need to do show more options. Oh, actually, it's up there as an icon, but I quite like it when it shows me words. So here we have copy. I went to more options and there's copy, and then I can right click and do show more options again, and there's paste. So you can usually do everything that you might do with keyboard shortcuts with the mouse as well. I just find it easier. And once you've learnt Control C is copy and Control V is paste, it's really quite straightforward. There are some other things like cut as well, and undo, which we can talk about another time, but copy and paste are probably the most important shortcuts to be aware of. So, though Control C and Control V are just two keyboard shortcuts, there are some other really, really useful ones as well though. So one that I use, and this will depend, how you do this will depend on how you access the function keys on whatever you're using. So on full-size keyboards like this, it's normally relatively straightforward. We have a whole row of function keys at the top that are only used for function, so I can just press that. On laptops, the function keys tend to be sort of dual purpose. They can be as function keys, and also to change the volume, change the brightness of the screen, to mute things, to turn the power off, whatever it is. So you might need to have a dedicated function key as well. So to do F4, you might have to press function, hold down function and press the F4 key. It depends on your laptop. I'm happy to have a look at anyone's laptop and tell you about how your particular laptop works. There's also function lock, which is a bit like caps lock. If you've got caps lock on, anytime you press a key, it's a capital letter. Likewise, function lock means by default, when I'm not pressing anything else, if I press a function key, I mean it as a function key as opposed to the other meaning of it, like changing the volume. But if you've got a regular keyboard in front of you, then that's really straightforward because it's just the function key. All of this was to get to the simple way of closing an application. So normally you can close an app by clicking on the X here, and I'll talk more about how to move windows around and things another time, but it's really important that you know how to close something. So you can close an application or close a window with the X at the top right. If I start it up again, another way of doing it is to press Alt F4. So the Alt key is normally next to the space bar. So I'm going to hold down Alt and just press F4 and it goes away. And one easy way of shutting down your computer is if you click anywhere on the desktop to make sure that nothing else has what's called focus, then if you press Alt F4, again, you're trying to close something. When you've clicked on the desktop, if you say close, it says, do you want to shut down, switch user, etc., etc. So that's normally how I shut my computer down. But there are other ways, such as using, again, the start menu, and there's the power icon there. But Alt F4 is a good shortcut to know for close something, whether that's an application or your whole computer. A few other shortcuts. I mentioned the Windows key before, so normally that's between Control and Alt. And if you just press Windows with nothing else, it opens the Start menu, which can be really useful. Particularly, I mentioned if I want to start something, suppose I want to start Chrome without taking my fingers off the keyboard, I can press Windows and then start typing Chrome, and there we go. It's the first thing in the list, so I could just press Return or Enter, and it would open. But there are other things you can do with the Windows key as well. And the one that I personally use the most is Windows and E. So I'm going to hold down Windows and press the E key and release it. And it opens Windows Explorer. So Windows Explorer is the application that you can use to find and manage files on your computer. So I could go into Documents and see a load of folders, a load of files, etc. And so Windows E being a quick way of opening Windows Explorer is really useful if I want to launch something that I've just downloaded, for example. It's a nice, easy way of doing that. These days, Windows Explorer has a new feature called Tabs, which we've seen on web browsers for a long time, where you can have various different folders open at the same time. I've now got Downloads open, and in a different tab, Documents open. We might look at Windows Explorer a little bit more later on in the course. It's a little bit more advanced. But again, how do we close it? Well, we could click on the X, or I can just press Alt F4. So that was Windows and E to launch Windows Explorer, and then Alt F4 to close it. Now I'm going to show you one slightly more advanced thing, and this is the last topic for today, is how to switch between applications. Now, most of the time, I personally have lots of applications open, and let's just open, you don't really need to know what any of these are, but I've got 3 different windows open, and I can switch between them by clicking on the right one, but usually, actually, I've got one of them full screen, or they might all be full screen, and I've got one of them behind the others, etc. You can switch by clicking on the icon. So that's switching between the command prompt as we've got here, and Notepad and Chrome. But if you've got lots of things open and you might have 2 different windows open, if I launch another Chrome window, well, I've now got 2 different Chrome windows. How can I tell which is which? Say one might be on the BBC News and one be on the church website, for example. It's taking a little while to load because it's going via my mobile dongle that doesn't have a great connection at the moment, but it will come up. There we go. So we've now got 4 different windows open: the command prompt, BBC News, the Tilehurst website, and Notepad. And while you can use the mouse to switch between all of those, I like to use Alt and Tab. So if I hold down Alt and then press and release Tab, it shows me all of these 4 windows. And I've still got Alt held down at the moment. And if I just press Tab, you can see the highlight is changing. And then if I release Alt now, it activates whatever window was selected. So I'm going to do that again. Hold down Alt, and I'm holding down Alt all the time until I say that I'm releasing it. Press and release Tab, press and release Tab, press and release Tab, and now I'm releasing Alt, and there's my command prompt again. So Alt Tab, really useful if you've got multiple windows open. If you haven't got multiple windows open, it's not useful to you at all. And if most of the time you only ever have one thing open, that's absolutely fine as well. None of this course is meant to tell you how you should use a computer. It's telling you some ways that you can use a computer. So just as a reminder of what we've covered today, we've covered how you can connect to Wi-Fi, which will be useful if you're attending the computer course in person, and could be useful if you're going to a hotel or you're on a train, or many other places these days have Wi-Fi connections so that you can get online wherever you are. We covered how to start an application, either from the taskbar or from the desktop, by double-clicking like that, or by the Start menu and All Apps and scrolling through the list, or by the Start menu and typing. We covered copy and pasting by selecting some text and using the right click to bring up the context menu and do copy, and then right click to bring up the context menu and paste, or keyboard shortcuts for those, which are Control-C for copy and Control-V for paste. And then we learnt keyboard shortcuts for Alt-F4, I don't want to save anything, for closing something, the Windows key to bring up the Start menu, Windows E to bring up Explorer, and Alt-Tab to switch between different applications. And there's one final thing that I promised I would do, which is show you how to get something onto the taskbar. So I'm just going to unpin this from the taskbar to start with. So now, if I've not got Notepad running, it's nowhere on the taskbar. If I start it in any other way, I happen to double click on the desktop, but I could have opened it via the Start menu, for example. Now, while it's running, I can right click here and say Pin to Taskbar. And now, even if it's not running, the taskbar is there for it to be ready for me to use again. So any application that you find yourself using a lot, when you've got it running, right click on the icon in the taskbar and say Pin to Taskbar, and then it will show up again for you next time you're using Windows, so it's easy to launch. That's all for this time. Next time we'll be looking at web browsing, how to do so safely, some tips and tricks. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye.